Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Adrian Botusan. Of course, I'm working with Microsoft. I'm part of the Global Black Belt team, a specialized team that is dealing with the most modern workloads which are coming from Microsoft, and my specialty is intelligent edge. And I'm covering Central and Eastern Europe, which is roughly 30-something countries. And today I'm going to be talking to you about what Microsoft is doing to implement cloud technologies in an intelligent edge mode in your data center. And I would start by explaining you what intelligent edge or hybrid is, because probably you've heard this quite a number of times, and most of the times it's not clear. It seems like a buzzword, but it's not. It's actually very simple. Initially, when the public cloud was launched, if you remember, everybody was saying that, yeah, everything is going to go to the cloud, everything is going to be in the cloud, but Microsoft realized very soon that actually there are some workloads and some regions and some countries where, okay, some workloads will go to the cloud, but a lot of workloads will still stay on premise for a number of reasons. Either it's compliance, either it's latency because it's a distance to the closest Azure data center, either it's local regulation. So this is why we identified that on-premise is still going to be something present in our enterprise world. Now, the question is, if you have on-premise, what do? You have option one, let's just say, we say, okay, you have the cloud with all the nice technologies, with PaaS services, with SaaS services, and on-premise, you keep your pure virtualization platform. Actually, you need to have two workloads. But what Microsoft did, and this is where we're coming to the edge hybrid definition, is that they said, look, instead of if the customer cannot come to the cloud, we're going to bring cloud technologies in the customer data center. And this edge comes from, we think of the edge of the cloud as being something elastic that we can extend in the customer data center. In a nutshell, as a bottom line, intelligent edge is Microsoft bringing cloud native technologies in your data center. And I hope this clarifies and demystifies everything that you heard before. Now, how is this enabled? Okay, how do we bring these services into a customer data center? And I would say there are two big pillars of this strategy. First one, it's Azure Arc. Okay, and I'm going to explain it to you immediately. Just very quickly, Azure Arc uses the Azure portal as a management layer to your on-premise workloads. So imagine that you go to an Azure portal and you manage your Hyper-V VMware environment, which is staying on-premise. So your workloads are staying on-premise, but the management is going to the cloud. So this is pillar number one, Azure Arc. Pillar number two, Azure Stack family or Azure Stack portfolio. Now, remember, Azure Arc is up in the cloud, while Azure Stack family is basically what gets into the customer data center. Okay, so this is, I would say, this is the big difference. Azure Arc is in the cloud. This is getting into your data center. Very quickly, so I'm going to detail each of these members of the family, but very quickly, Azure Stack Hub, it's an appliance, a rack-sized appliance that you put in the data center. Azure Stack HCI is an operating system that you actually install on commodity hardware. It's just you install Windows Server today. And Azure Stack Edge is a blade class appliance, which is very, very tailored and very specialized for AI and for IoT workloads. So when you hear IoT, when you hear machine learning, Azure Stack Edge is the option for you. Now, I would start with Azure Arc. I'm not going to stress too much Azure Arc because I understand that there is a certain concern more towards the Azure Stack family. But still, when we're talking to the customers, that they hear about this hybrid strategy and they say, okay, but you know what? If I have hybrid, I have maybe multiple data centers, and I have definitely a complexity. I have different operating system. I have different hardware. From a compliance perspective, I'm not doing really well, because if an auditor is coming and saying, hey, give me an inventory of your assets in different data centers, this is difficult. It's inconsistency, because not what I have in a data center I have different in another data center. So there are certain challenges when we're talking with hybrid, but not just hybrid, with multi-data center, with multiple cities deployments. So for what Azure Arc, why did it come? Because usually when we did some surveys, I would say enterprise customers have something between 100 and 1,000 or thousands of applications, right? And those applications are, you know, very non-consistent. They can run on different platforms, they can run on different operating systems, so that is bringing a lot of complexity. Infrastructure, there is a lot of legacy applications which are running on bare metal, okay, because they're only run on bare metal, or some are running on a specific OEM, some are running on Oracle, some are running on, I don't know, IBM middleware. So infrastructure is really diverse. Not to mention, not sure how relevant is this in your country, but still some customers, actually the customers that starts the cloud journey, they prefer to have multiple clouds, especially for redundancy, because, you know, if Azure fails, I have AWS, if AWS fails, I have Google Cloud, and so on and so forth. So all this put together, this and this, actually you have a lot of complexity, okay? So what the smart people from Redmond thought, they said, you know what, we take the Azure portal, which is here, and through Azure Arc, which is here, I manage these which are on the customer data center, right? And this is working in two ways. The first way is, hey, you know what, these workloads which are sitting here, I put abstractization layer, and they are going to be visible in the Azure cloud as Azure resources. So your data stays on premise, nothing goes to the cloud, okay? Your data, your, I don't know, front end of the applications, whatever what you have here, it's still on premise, but they're visible here. And once I have them visible in the Azure cloud, I can start treating them, and I'm going to explain you just a couple of slides down what does it mean. But also the option number two is that I use Azure Arc and I take Azure services, so I have services here in the Azure cloud, and I take this service and through Azure Arc, I put it in your data center. So this is working two ways, up and down. So this is what Azure Arc is, because for instance, I can take Azure SQL, not SQL Server, Azure SQL, and run in your data center. So let's go just a bit into details. There are three flavors of Azure Arc, and with that, I'll stop. If you have additional questions, more than happy to respond to you. First one is for servers. When I say servers, I say even physical servers, okay? Irrespective of operating system, if it's on VMware, if it's on OpenStack, if it's on Hyper-V, I don't care. So as long as it's a server or virtual machine running half known operating system, then it's available And you can see these servers, as I told you earlier, in the Azure portal. Number two, the second, so I say this is one, this is two, okay. Number two is the same as Azure service, but for Kubernetes. So again, I am not sure how spread Kubernetes application development is in your country, but in case it is, what I'm doing here for servers, I'm doing here for Kubernetes, and it's pretty much the same. I don't care if it's running on Rancher, on OpenShift, if it's AKS on HCI, I don't care. As long as it's a Kubernetes cluster, I can manage it from the Azure portal. And the third, if you remember the previous slide, is the one when I bring Azure services into the data center. And here we bring two services, and that's really, you should remember that it's Azure SQL and PostgreSQL. Basically, we started with two database services. And I have a slide in this presentation. I'm not going to stress out to explain you the difference between having a virtual machine, putting the operating system, putting SQL server, and consuming databases versus this option. I'm going to explain it to you. So this is Azure Arc, again, using the Azure portal as a management layer for your on-premise workloads, both by seeing them and managing them in the Azure portal and pushing databases down in your data center. Right, now, let's talk about the second pillar of hybrid strategy. As I said, Azure Arc is the first, Azure Stack Family is the second. And now let's talk about Azure Stack Family. And I'll start with Azure Stack Hub, okay? The big appliance. So what's Azure Stack Hub? As I said earlier, it's a rack-sized appliance that customers are installing in their data center. Some call it a cloud in a box, okay? Because you have it, you install it, you turn it on, and you have Azure services in your data center, which are these. It's built in, it's integrated system. If some customers are asking me, can I download the software somewhere and install it on my hardware? No, this is embedded. It comes hardware from the OEM and software from Microsoft, and you buy an SKU together, okay? It can work both connected and disconnected, and it's extremely important, especially for data sovereignty. Most of the units that I sold across Central and Eastern Europe were especially due to data sovereignty. The national legislation, even in European Union, is getting stricter and stricter to what data goes across the border. So this is why Azure Stack Hub, it's a very strong proposition in this direction. So, as I said, it's an embedded system. So I have Azure services and hardware coming together with a single line of support integrated. The minimum size is 4 servers. The maximum size is 16 servers. So basically you fill up a rack. The good part here is that if you start with 4 servers, okay, you have a minimum investment and you want to grow, you can add +2, then you say, you know what, I'm going to put 4 more until you reach the maximum of 16. So you can start small and then building up and putting extra servers. And the process of addition of extra servers is totally painful, no business interruption. Basically, once you add them, the experience is they're just added to the storage and to the compute pool. As I said earlier, here I have a minimum configuration with 4 servers. Of course, you also have an HLH host, which is coming from the OEM, BMC switch also from the OEM, and 2 top-of-rack switches, here these 2, which are connected to your border devices on layer 3. And you can do BGP or static routing. Of course, highly recommended to use BGP. So this is something that after a customer purchases Azure Stack Hub, it integrates it into its data centers. They put it, and the top of rack switches are connected to the border devices. Everything is hyperconverged, meaning that what I put here, like CPU, memory, storage, participates in a resource pool which is automatically managed by the operating system. So when I turn on the machine, it already has all these, let's just say, hyperconverged already, and I can start using these resources. I don't need to do something by myself, like doing this conversion or addition to the storage pool or to memory pool, so on and so forth. These are the OEMs which are present. If somebody's asking me, okay, who's the best? There's no such thing, because most of the times the hardware that they can put inside, it's very limited, and we did that on purpose. Is simply we didn't give them too many options in order to keep the system as stable as possible. Okay, and of course, more interesting discussion is price. Maybe it's what support has in your country, and so on and so forth. Right. Okay. What services do we have on Azure Stack Hub? So first and foremost, and the most important, is virtual machines, right? Fundamentally, we're talking about a virtualization platform. So it's virtual machines which are templated virtual machine. It's like in any public cloud. So you choose from a list what VM size you want and use that VM. You can't, play around like I'm going to put, 4 cores and 2 terabytes of memory. So you have a list, and there's plenty of options to choose from. We have memory intensive, we have CPU intensive, we have storage intensive, but this is how you deal with the virtual machines. Network in Azure Stack Hub, it's hyperconverged like anything else, but to give you a better indication, I don't need to install an NVA from Barracuda or from F5 and start provisioning network appliances. No, they're out of the box. For instance, I'm creating a VLAN. I'm just giving, say, create VLAN. Okay. If I want to do a site-to-site VPN, if I want to provision a VPN gateway, I just select VPN gateway and what SKU of the VPN gateway, and it is being provisioned. So I don't need to do anything more. I mean, it's just a resource that I am provisioning, right? Storage. The storage which participates here is direct attached storage. So remember when I said the number of servers, so all the storage which is attached to the servers participates in the storage pool. If you've ever worked with storage spaces direct, probably you know what I'm talking about. The difference here is that the storage can be exposed as cloud storage, meaning I can talk about blobs, about tables, and about queues. Okay, very important, because if I have cloud native applications which are writing on queues or writing on tables type of storage, I have it available, right? Key Vault, and this is already, we're entering into the applications world. Key Vault, it's already a platform as a service, it's a PaaS. So Key Vault, it's storing all your secrets. It's the same service as in Azure Stack, like in Azure. Meaning that if I want to store passwords, if I want to store keys, if I want to store certificates, if I want to store connection strings to databases, I store them here. And instead of retrieving them, I just do the validation in the Key Vault. So whoever is writing the password, it gets in the Key Vault and it gets the validation. So this is way more secure than, I don't know, storing the password somewhere else. Okay, this is Key Vault, very important. Containers. So you know that now containers, it's a very strong buzzword, and this is for a good reason, because pretty much everything in app development today it's on containers. So we have two options. We have Azure Kubernetes Service, which again it's a platform as a service. It's a PaaS, okay? And I can provision containers on virtual machines. The difference between the two is that here I provision a virtual machine, I put probably Linux that supports containers, and I start managing my containers manually. While here, I just say provision me 8-node cluster, and the system creates the nodes, creates the master nodes, creates the storage subsystem, creates the network subsystem. So this is a true platform as a service. So this is the difference between the two. Azure App Service is another platform as a service. Think about an IaaS, an IaaS server, or an I don't know, Apache server, web server, for which I don't need to manage the operating system. So I am just telling the system I need a web server with, I don't know, with .NET or with, I don't know, Python, Ruby, this version that has to have this many cores, and I just provision it. So I don't need to provision the VM. I don't need to patch the VM. I don't need to update in any way. So this is also very important for app development. Azure Functions, another great functionality for developers. So instead of writing an application, I write a function, meaning functions are stateless. So if from within an application I say I invoke a function, it goes to this repository. By the way, I can write it in any language. It goes, the function wakes up, takes the data that has been parsed over, processes whatever functionality this function has, returns the data, and then goes to sleep. So instead of keeping an applications 24/7, I have functions. And by the way, functions can be reused between applications. Again, a very nice functionality. And here with that, we're going a bit into the IoT ML world, because we have IoT Hub. IoT Hub, another platform as a service. So if you ever hear about smart cities projects or industries, oil and gas, or this type of stuff, they use sensors, they use cameras. Okay, how do I manage them? Because I don't want my data to get to the cloud. And IoT Hub is the tool because it does device management. Event Hub goes together with IoT Hub, and this is the pipe through which the information is coming from all the sensors. So I have like hundreds of servers. They use Azure Hub as a communication channel, and the data gets to the IoT Hub. And once I have the data in IoT Hub, I use Azure Cognitive Services, another platform as a service, which does, it's like a toolbox of tools, it's a toolbox of applications, if you want, that do some specific AI things. For instance, language detection, OCR, sentiment analysis, language understanding, and it's just a couple of them because the list is very large. So I can use the data that I got from my cameras and start applying cognitive services in my data center. I don't need to go to the cloud. We support the Ethereum blockchain. We support SQL 2019. We support MySQL databases on an IaaS level, and Stream Analytics go together with Events Hub, meaning that once I have the data coming from my IoT devices, I can run some analysis from before the data is being stored, basically. If I want to manage, I don't know if you work with Terraform, but Terraform supports Azure Stack Hub, which is pretty great because it has great management functionality across pretty much any environment. So with Terraform, I can provision a VM on Azure Stack Hub, or I can provision a VM on VMware, and so this is Terraform. We support OpenShift if you want to if you want to deploy your Kubernetes not on AKS, but on OpenShift, we fully support it. We support also for Kubernetes Cloud Foundry, the open source and Pivotal Cloud Foundry. Both of them, we support them. And if you go to GitHub, we have tens of templates also that are supported. And last but not the least, we have the Azure Marketplace. Okay, and what is Azure Marketplace? Basically, so you have the core services that I told you about, like VMs, like IoT Hub, like cognitive services, and so on and so forth. But also, you can go to the Azure Marketplace and you have close to 300 solutions right now that you can download and use locally. And the solutions can be, I don't know, an Ubuntu server or a CM, an event tracker, or they can be a load balancer from KEM. So a lot of other things which are available in Azure, I can download them locally and start using them on top of the services which are coming already. Where do you use it? What business scenario? The biggest success, I saw it in the DevOps world, to be honest with you, because it has all the tools needed to deploy, to use a cloud application model for applications, and you don't need to use the cloud. So I have managed databases, I have managed Kubernetes, I have managed a front end of the application, I have Key Vault to store my secrets, I put a Git repository locally, and hey, I have a full CI/CD pipeline. So very, very, very mature and very solid DevOps platform. And again, this is a discussion for developers. If I'm talking with the infra guys, for them it's just another appliance. But if I'm talking to the developers or with the business decision makers, they understand. They understand why this is important and why this is sometimes really, really important. Another type of customers and another business scenario is very much in the financial institutions, public sector, system integrators. Hey, we have one today, right? That is actually hosting this event. Financial institutions, because financial institutions cannot go to the cloud very much. They have very tough regulations. They have a lot of legacy applications, and with Azure Stack Hub, we can give a new life to that legacy applications. By the way, if you have SQL or Windows Server 2008, if you host them on Azure Stack Hub, you benefit of free end-of-life support. You don't need to pay for extended support for this tool. So this is really, really interesting for the financial institutions. And public sector, it's also a very strong customer for Azure Stack Hub, especially because it's a multi-tenant environment. So I'm talking with governments, and governments is like, hey, we are talking about government cloud. And the fact that you have multi-tenancy, meaning that Ministry of Interior, it's a tenant. Ministry of Agriculture, it's another tenant. Agency for I don't know what, it's another tenant. At the end of the day, IT operations have a separate bill of consumption for each of these agencies. So for them, it's very easy to say, okay, internal cross-charging, internal customer, I'm charging you this much, I'm charging you that much, and I'm charging that agency this much. And at least I can show exactly how much it's consuming. So this is another public sector. It's another very, very strong, I would say, internal customer for Azure Stack Hub. And this is the schema that I told you about a bit earlier. Okay, so I have platform as a service. Why it's so important? Why it's so? Because, well, it's simple. So remember the example with SQL. Okay. Option number one, I put SQL on a virtual machines, meaning that, so this is the virtual machine. Okay, it's managed by the vendor. So network, storage, servers. What do I have to do as an IT operations? I need to install the operating system. If required, a middleware. Definitely I need a runtime. And then I manage the data, then I manage the application in itself. So I have the OS, I need to install SQL Server, and then I manage the data. Now, in option number two, when I have PaaS platform, right? I don't need to manage the OS, I don't need to manage the middleware, I don't need to manage the runtime, I only manage the data in the application. So basically, if I want to consume SQL databases, for me, it's very simple. I start spinning up databases. I don't need to provision VMs, I don't need to install SQL Server. So because I have this service as a platform as a service, I say, hey, you know what, provision this database with these many tables, with these characteristics, and the system provisioning it for you. And you don't need to patch, you don't need to update, you don't need to maintain everything what is happening in this part, okay? So this is why Azure Stack Hub has so many platform as a service. IoT Hub is the same, Cognitive Services is the same, so Web Apps is the same. So this is why it's really, really important for customers, because it has this platform as a service out of the box, right? And with that, I think I finished Azure Stack Hub. Let's go to member number 2 of the family, Azure Stack HCI. Now, if Azure Stack Hub is an appliance, Azure Stack HCI is an operating system. Very important to make the distinction. Azure Stack Hub is a physical appliance that you buy from Dell, from HP, from whoever you want. Azure Stack HCI is an operating system. And basically, Azure Stack HCI is Windows Server 2019, which had all these roles removed, which has Stretch Cluster, which is a great storage innovation added, and it's a host operating system. Windows Server can be guest and host. HCI is a host operating system, okay? It's the hypervisor. This is the difference between the two, between Windows Server and Azure Stack HCI. If the customer is asking me, okay, so does it mean that Windows Server is going to die? No, never. They're going to go in parallel forever, but they do reach different targets. They do reach different audiences. The big advantage here is that it runs on your hardware. Remember, Azure Stack Hub, you need to buy the hardware embedded. Here, if you have some hardware which is like less than 5 years old, guess what? You can install it and you can test it tomorrow. It's an Azure subscription model, meaning that instead of paying a license, you're paying a monthly fee and you get your, how to put it, you get all the new features you get for life. So it's not like Windows Server where, you know, a new version shows up and this one is end of life, so I need to purchase, I had Windows 2012 and now I need to buy 2019 and it's going to be like this forever. No, Azure Stack HCI, once you pay the monthly fee, you have support and you have access to this forever. So this is the big difference between the two. So as I said, all the roles of print server, domain controller have been removed. It's a very small operating system. It's almost a core operating system. What does it have left? Hyper-V as a virtualization layer. So Hyper-V is your hypervisor. Storage space is direct for your storage, and SDN for all what it's network. And everything is hyper-converged. As I said, it's running on your hardware, or if you want to go and purchase your hardware, you're free to go. You put Linux, Windows Server VMs, and you can manage it in 2 ways. Locally, you have Windows Admin Center. I don't know if you used it, but this is like the next VMM. Okay, it's very modern. You can see it right here. Okay, it works in a browser. It's free. You don't need to pay anything for it. But you can also manage your HCI from the Azure portal. Okay, again, it's really, really up to you how you decide to use it. Now, as we said, it's hybrid by design. It connects to an Azure subscription and with Azure Arc that I discussed very, very early in my presentation. Together with Azure Arc, you do have capabilities of managing your workloads on premise. As I said, I can create a virtual machines from the Azure portal on premise. I can do the monitoring and management of my deployed cluster from the Azure portal. And as I said, it's an up-to-date service. I don't need to pay new versions. That's it. Okay. If you have an enterprise agreement, or if you want to go to a CSP, you can consume from your existing monetary commitment. Together with that, you can use Azure services if you want. Again, if you want to do Azure Site Recovery for DR, or if you want to use Azure Backup for backup, I can use Windows Admin Center as a management tool with the HCI cluster, and I can do ASR to Azure or Azure Backup to Azure. Of course, Monitor, Security Center. So there's plenty of other services that I can use. Now, if somebody's asking me what is the platform of choice for, let's just say databases, for where every IOPS is important, I would say HCI. So it's the storage, especially the storage performance, it's really top notch. Is secured by design. I mean, and also, as I said here, it includes security update for Windows Server 2008. Really, really important. Built-in high availability and DR. Stretch cluster means that if I have 4 servers, or no, let's just say if I have 8 servers, okay, I have the option to deploy all of them in a rack. That's fine. Or I can deploy 4 in a rack and 4 in another rack in the same server room for high availability, or I can deploy 4 of them in the data center and 4 of them in another data center 200 kilometers away, and I have disaster recovery. And the stretch cluster is managed upon creation. So when I create my cluster, I say all of them are here, or they're separate here, or they're separate there. And together with that, I say, depending on the distance, of course, I say use synchronous or asynchronous replication. So really, really important. This is out of the box. This is at storage level. You don't need to use, I don't know what other tools and so on and so forth. It's really important because it's leveraging existing skills. So if your people ever worked with Windows Server, with Hyper-V, then they know. They simply know. It's very simple. Pretty much all the big SIs, Veeam, Convo, SolarWinds, and not only do support HCI already, and you can benefit from automation because you can use the whole PowerShell framework with HCI. Here, there is a link with the existing choices of OEM vendors. Basically, you have a huge catalog with hundreds and hundreds of models from all possible vendors. So if you want to buy up-to-date hardware today, you go to this catalog and see if this hardware is really compatible or not. But hey, as I said, you can use existing hardware even. So if I have some hardware which is not really old, it should be working without a problem. Multiple form factors, so it can go like regular rack size, like blades here, or I can go this small. By the way, minimum deployment is 2 servers. Okay, so I can go with these to like this or like this, and I can go in a small branch office, and I have a very solid system running there. So where are the top scenarios? I would say every time I have customers which are coming and say, hey, you know what, I have a hardware refresh. What do you recommend me to do? Because I have the option of going with this or I'm going with that. And I said, you know what, hardware wise, I'm not really sure, but if you really want a modern operating system and also very price competitive, then HCI it's for you. And also for branch offices, so I'm talking to banks, I'm talking with insurance agencies, not so much today because of the pandemic, but nevertheless, I talk to them and they say, yeah, for a branch office, if I put, like, as I said, 2 of these, it's absolutely enough for me. Okay, so it's really great. Also, as I said, SQL databases, if you ask me where to put them, HCI. And also for VDI, it's another good scenario. So if you have VDI scenarios for virtual desktops in branch offices, as I said, Azure Stack HCI, it's a very good option. And last but not the least, Kubernetes. And let me explain you why. Because traditionally, the virtualization platform, how were they working? So you're having the hardware, as I said, and then you're having the operating system like here, HCI, which is running on bare metal. You put some services, you install Azure Stack HCI. And then you're provisioning VMs, right? This is what you are doing. Now, today with HCI, you can also provision Kubernetes out of the box. So not just VMs. If I want to spin up VMs, I spin up VMs. If I want to spin up Kubernetes cluster, I spin up Kubernetes cluster. And be very careful because we're talking about Azure Kubernetes service. Remember, it's a platform as a service as well. I don't need to provision a VM and put Linux and that supports Kubernetes and start managing manually my Kubernetes. No, I say here, provision me 2 VMs and here provision me an 8-node Kubernetes cluster. And boom, out of the box, it's working. So really, really, really important. And on top of that, of course, I have all the applications, virtual applications, cloud native applications. Now, why I have Azure Arc here is because Azure Arc here is going to plug into this Kubernetes cluster and start to bring Azure SQL. Remember when I told you the difference between classical SQL and Azure SQL? If I show it the Kubernetes here, I come from Azure Arc and start using HCI as a platform for my Arc services. And last but not the least, Azure Stack H, the last member of the family. It's a small appliance. It's a blade. You can buy it as a blade. Actually, you're not buying it. Is an Azure managed appliance. You order it from the Azure portal and you have it in leasing. You're paying a monthly fee. When your project is ready, you ship it back to Microsoft and you stop paying. So it's a full OpEx model. It has harder accelerated machine learning, and this is why it's really useful. For instance, and I'm going to tell you about some scenarios, but the fact that you can have in this small blade, if you have modules which are written specifically for this hardware, it's absolutely stunning how speedy it is compared with a regular CPU. And also, it's a cloud storage gateway. I see customers that are using it for large quantities of data transfer to Azure. For instance, I have libraries who are doing digitization and they want to store it in the cloud. This one acts as a gateway because I create a share folder here and I start pushing my data in this folder, and this gateway automatically streams the data into the Azure. Okay, I don't need to do anything else. It's not going to overload. It's not going. It's slowly streaming towards Azure. So it has different form factors. It's commercial normally that you're putting into your data center, and this is for factories. This is, for instance, is battery powered for different places. So different formats. What are the hardware acceleration options? So the FPGA from Intel, but most interesting for all the customer is the fact that it has NVIDIA T4 cards. There is a lot of modules written for CUDA for NVIDIA that you are able to use. So you just go and look on GitHub if you want open source. If you don't want proprietary, open source modules which are written for NVIDIA, and you see how many you're going to find. And more recently, also this VPU from Intel, which is also used for, especially for machine learning. Now, what use cases? As I said, machine learning at the edge, IoT solutions, and as I said, if you have large quantities of data to transfer to the cloud. But I think this one is the most important for our customers. And these are some examples. For instance, I remember I told you about traffic management. So with the module, you can, for instance, here is you have live monitoring, and you see that the cars are with the green and the pedestrians are with yellow. So you can do like a stream analysis of traffic flow with pedestrian walks, and you have modules which are analyzing the traffic for you. Here, in the second example, is for smart traffic with traffic lights. So depending on the traffic flow, to adapt this traffic light or this traffic light to work depending on the flow, because maybe in the morning this one is more crowded, but maybe in the afternoon maybe this one is more crowded, and the traffic to dynamically adjust the traffic lights to have a more fluid traffic. And the last one is for removing sensitive data at the edge. And in some countries it's forbidden even to store locally people's faces or license plates. So you can have a module stored on Azure Stack Edge, which says before uploading the image, blur people's faces. And this is what you can do in order not to be non-compliant. So as you can see, plenty of functionality. Here, for instance, it's an application used by one of our customers for social distancing and for masks. So it's using this camera in order to detect, and here you can see the distance between the people, and also it's detecting if it has mask or not. So this is another example, and everything is happening on that little blade. Everything is happening there, and it's really impressive, such a small device that can have so much compute power. Now, these are the scenarios where we see Azure Stack Edge to be really useful for our customer. Manufacturing and energy, pretty much everything that is oil rigs, perimeter security, for instance, cameras, to detect if the workers wear their helmets on or not, if they swipe their cards. For instance, in energy, we're working with Schlumberger, and we're working with Schneider, with drill plant from Schlumberger. Also, there are some softwares which are based on vibration of pipes with the sensors put. There are modules which can detect if a malfunction is about to happen, and this is especially in preventive maintenance. Also in retail, there are sensors which are on very large fridges, and this is just one example. And also based on vibration and temperature, it can detect if a fridge is about to break down. And it's really important because in any Carrefour, I don't know, Kaufland, whatever you have in your country, if one of those fridges is breaking down, all the food needs to be thrown away. So there are losses. So this is why having preventive maintenance of these fridges was very important for this specific retailer. And also in government and in public sector, really important. You have real-time insights, for instance, in field operations, for if you have floods or if you have earthquakes, and you need real-time information with drones, with cameras to show you where people are. This is where you can use it. Smart traffic, smart cities, for instance, for temperature reading, for people houses. This is also another scenario where I've seen it use it. And with that, I have finished. Thank you very much.